title. I am Aviv Ovadya, as mentioned, the CEO of AI and Democracy Foundations, and we work to accelerate governance innovation, in particular to address a wide variety of risks impacting democracy at all scales. We're thinking about power and incentive structures around the world being reshaped by AI advances, and ultimately our goal is for the lobbies to keep pace with AI. We revised on innovative democratic processes used by governments around the world across our team and have piloted democratic systems innovations with frontier labs in ARIA. And we could think about applying these democratic innovations directly to AI at the AI system level, the word level, and even at the sort of governance regulator level, and even actually across the Legos. So you're thinking about multiple organizations, industry bodies, international agreements, consortia of actual AI agents, and so on. But like practically, what does this look like? So primarily we focus on accelerating and what we call better democratic systems. And it's a little hard to do this in some ways, right? We've heard from many people here already, but the precise shape of the future, is like pretty uncertain, right? We know there's some risks, right? We know our concentrations and you step away from here, so.
There's coordination challenges, there's pressure toward disempowerment, a little bit of space. Yeah, I think that's probably. I saw. And our efficient environment is doing great all the time. And we also know that there's some building blocks that are really helpful. We've heard about a bit of that here already, but go a little deeper at some areas and help navigate those risks.
So one of the things that we're thinking about is, in addition, there's lots of detail and particular implementations, but we also really want flexible building blocks that can be applied as needed. And we want to think about what are the properties that enable them to be used across the many possible future institutions that are directly testable and usable today. So in particular, we focus, as you'll see why, on deliberative processes. Like that's where most of our main bets are at. And for simplicity in this talk, I'm going to use deliberative process here to mean this sort of pretty high level thing. It's a combination of a population microcosm, an information microcosm, in order to make high quality decisions. And just about everything that sort of people have talked about, or many of the examples that I've heard already, are sort of from that arena, and not every burst.
And there are varying levels of quality, democraticness, and sort of the output. Just how good that is. And so, concrete example that you referred to already for those who are here in your talks are in citizen assemblies. And the basic idea here is pretty simple. You have a representative group of citizens, people, they may be picked to be there. They're chosen for partitions. There's some kind of sampling mechanism. And then in a traditional citizen assembly, they might get a week or more of a dedicated, compensated time of being spaced out over a month, of weekends or two, to dig into an issue of facilitation. Is like essentially scaffolded workflows that enable them to do some decision making with input from experts, stakeholders, and AI systems now. That end in a decision that shows sort of where the common ground is, and that might go to a decision maker, or it might, in some narrow set of cases so far, be the decision maker. But across, this ecosystem of people doing this, running these kinds of processes is an exponential. It's unfortunately the exponential is a little smaller than the one for AI, but it is an exponential. And there have been now thousands of processes run like this around the world. And just to make this a little visceral, this is the European Habit cycle. This is where members of Parliament. Where instead of members of Parliament, these are random citizens selected from across the EU, across every EU language, and this is something that feeds into EU policymaking several times a year. So they've got what they call citizen panels, sort of a citizen assembly version that feeds into policymaking three or so times a year. And why is this important? Why does this matter? There's some really, really nice properties here. Right, deliberative processes are enormously easier to spin up and iteratively test than elections for legislative bodies, even when they're directly integrating and complementing those established structures.
It can be designed to incorporate deep expertise, diverse perspectives. And as we've heard also, if they can identify common ground. And most importantly, they can eliminate any of the perverse incentives and adversarial attacks that you might worry about through data selection, including things like even like civil paths to some extent.
And so many of the other promising building blocks here also rely on many of the same underlying capabilities that you need for what defining this sort of broad arena of deliberative processes. Deliberation provides critical tools for addressing all of these challenges and core infrastructure for the many necessary institutions. So if we can use this well, there's so many things that the ability to make decisions in wise ways through representative input. There's so many problems that you can actually move significantly towards solving. It's a new sort of action you could take on the board. And so let's just say deliberation is now this goal to have better democratic systems. What does a better actually mean? What is a high quality decision? So a general challenge for democratic systems like AI systems is they also have what I would call a jagged frontier. Many of these things analogs apply. You have capability jumps that require more human compute. Or if you want something to be a certain level of quality, you need more time for people. You can distill a complex process like a citizen assembly. It might be a week, 2 weeks, into something that might be only a few hours. But you got to be really careful to ensure, is your system actually still good enough? Are your outputs going to be good enough? Is it going to be something that is actually wise at the end of the day? And so one of the things that we've done is essentially a first principles analysis, building on lots of practical experience from running processes like citizen assemblies and lighter weight deliberative processes and other kinds of mechanisms for democratic decision making, and developing a set of dimensions that sort of span the core of democratic system design. I'm not going to walk through them directly here, but if you want to dig deeper, this framework is part of a larger body of work, and it's an ICU opposition paper that we put together on that, in particular how it applies to AI. So each dimensions, rather than as being one that can be broken down into more measurable democratic capabilities, right? Like how implementable are the outputs? How adaptable are they to different contexts? We can assess each of those capability gaps. We can build a map of the critical research questions needed to address them. We can identify concrete products that need to be built that directly improve those capabilities. And we've sourced these from democratic practitioners around the world, and they tackle concrete process bottlenecks and quality challenges. So, zooming back out, building on all this work, we can now holistically assess capabilities for both an ecosystem as a whole of democratic systems design and development, and for particular democratic processes and systems. And so now we have a way of talking about sort of what better actually means. Well, what does it look like to improve on these conventions and capabilities as quickly as possible? So we see there being 4 critical ingredients. So first, we want to target the democratic capabilities directly, right? We need, close this, it's very concrete gaps that, I illustrated a moment ago. The frontier doesn't need to be as jagged as it currently is. If you can sort of fund the right research, the right systems design, the right endpoints like enterprise layer that enables interoperability. That was sort of what one of the things I kick off with Metagov before I founded the Democracy Foundation. Like that's a core infrastructure that we for capabilities develop with. And so part of that is not just directly building things, but if you can create well-structured advanced market commitments and prizes for capabilities jumps on particular domains, that is incredibly valuable, and it can drive massive third-party investment in the space. If we have the right enterprise-grade infrastructure that actually handles all these really challenging compliance, people talk about identity issues, like all of these sort of underlying challenges, that helps enable 1,000 flowers to bloom effectively. And the level of experimentation that you need if you really want to get the kind of iterative feedback loops that would be ideal. There's so many, this is just a small smattering from our map of concrete fundable projects and components that need to get built, quickly. And I wish it was as easy as just asking an agent to do the thing. There's a lot of complexity and iteration of using these things in practice. But it's hard to even know
if our capabilities are actually rooted without measurement. And so right now you can think about sort of democratic system design. Like there is no science of it to some extent. I mean, there are pieces of arts of political science, arts of other fields, but you can think of it as sort of like pre-benchmark, pre-ImageNet, like there's no like RCT type thing. Like none of that is really viable in a significant sense. There are little pockets throughout. And so we need good evals and benchmarks and data. If we can get better at simulating processes, we can test different approaches. Right now, simulations are not really trustworthy, but they could be maybe. We can evaluate where representative agents might be sufficient and where we really want humans in the driver's seat. And like, there's lots of normative components to that, but there's also just like, is it even good enough to make effective decisions or to represent someone at all? And we need to like ensure a rapidly growing field doesn't repeat costly mistakes. Like I see this over and over again, people falling into the same sort of dead ends, the graveyards of projects. We also can't learn about doing, right? If we're going to have accelerated innovation, you need to actually do iterations. You need to fund a portfolio of processes. You need to do lots of low risk, high volume pilots. That rapidly informs R&D. And then you need these high signal, sort of low volume processes that help ensure that this approach is actually taken seriously, that it's institutionalized in a meaningful sense. And I guess the final piece, and this is sort of where we're focusing the most, is ecosystem-wide acceleration and scaffolding. This is where you're thinking about like any new paradigm, and this is, yes, this has been used around the world in various level, across governments as I sort of illustrated, but this is still something, especially from the US context, within a number of other jurisdictional contexts, definitely within a corporate context, it's still pretty new. Like, I've helped, observed and supported some work actually using these processes of public utilities across the team. But again, this is still new and it can still be delegitimized as an approach if people mess up too badly. And so there's a need for standards. A high profile failure could significantly slow adoption. And so there's a piece around standards. There's around the way in which advocacy and storytelling can actually help drive adoption. Like, what are the best ways to do that? How can we accelerate those pieces? There's levers with things like ballot measures that people have been exploring, where you can essentially institutionalize these without going around existing power structures. And then of course interoperability is absolutely critical to reduce replication and sort of fragmentation. One underlying piece though is that you need to be having actors who are able to identify balance and direct resources toward places as absolutely possible. That's sort of a lot of what we're doing, sort of mapping out pieces of the space using tools like this democratic capabilities map that we're building out. So assume that so I'm not going to go into this in detail, but one of the things that we're particularly focused on is building out all those ingredients with an ARPA-style model for rapidly accelerating work toward each part of this ecosystem. And there just isn't a lot of time if we want democracy to keep pace. We feel pretty confident there's enormous amounts of funds that could be deployed rapidly to make significant progress on each of these key ingredients. Like each one of those is like $3 to $10 million bucket. And in many of those places, we know already who are the people who are well positioned to do that. And the entire democracy space and innovation space is relatively under-resourced, is extremely under-resourced compared to many of the other domains like across AI, crypto, et cetera. Anyway, you can right now see an early version of this democratic capabilities gap map. It's at democracybuild.org. That framework I mentioned, part of a larger body of work. If you want to dig deeper, there's so much more we could talk about around like the actual work around adoption within sort of institutions relating to AI and the deliberative workflows that enable all of this to be effective. Happy to discuss that offline or in Q&A. Is to bring it all just together. We believe that investment in better democratic systems can dramatically mitigate the key challenges posed by AI advances, even under extreme uncertainty. There isn't a lot of time if we want democracy to keep pace, right? We feel confident that there is an opportunity to deploy enormous amounts of funds quickly to make progress on many of these key ingredients. We need
to make democratic systems and processes better. Our current systems, as we've seen, even with recent events, are not up to the task of the sort of the challenges that we're facing. We know what needs to happen to do that, and there's simply a matter of execution and resourcing. And that's it.